Hey everybody, thanks for watching this week's video. This is our second week of our new series called Explain. We're talking about the Bible, what does it mean, what's its purpose, and this week we're talking about context is everything. So let's start with a story. Back in the day, a guy and a girl from two different countries decided that they wanted to get married. So during their wedding reception, the groom thought it would be cool if he made everyone else look stupid by telling a riddle that no one could figure out. So he got up, he told the riddle, and yeah, no one could figure out what the riddle was. People were getting super frustrated, to the point that a group of guys from the bride's country came up to her and said, hey, I know y'all just got married and whatever, but if you can get your dude to tell you the answer so you can tell us, we won't kill your family. Oh, and congrats. So the bride freaked out. She went up to her new husband and she said, hey hubby, you're so smart for figuring out a riddle that no one else could figure out, but I'm your wife. Can you at least tell me what the answer is? I'll love you forever. And the husband gave in. He gave her the answer, and she told the group of guys that threatened her. And these guys came strolling in and said, hey, we know the answer, where's our prize? And this made the groom so mad that he left, went to his bride's country, killed a bunch of people, and then left town. And the father of the bride was like, well, that was the worst wedding reception ever. I guess he's not coming back. I guess I'll just give my daughter away to someone else. And that's what he did. He gave her away to another guy. Some time passed and the groom came back and said, hey y'all, sorry about my tantrum, where's my bride? And the dad was like, dude, we didn't think you were coming back. I gave her away to someone else. So the groom got mad again. And this time he caught a bunch of foxes, he tied their tails together, and then he set them on fire and he threw them in a field and he burned down a bunch of crops and a bunch of vineyards. Anger management, dude. It's a crazy story, but the crazier part is that this story is in the Bible. I mean, I may have changed a couple things, but for the most part, it's exactly what you would read in Judges chapter 14 and 15. So what do we do with stories like that? Like, what does it teach us? Like, it teaches us not to be angry, it teaches us not to burn foxes. I mean, what's this story about and how does this apply to me? If you remember last week, Cameron told us that the point of the Bible is to point us to God. The Bible is about Jesus. But let's be honest, sometimes when we're reading the Bible, just like this story about the bride and the groom, Jesus doesn't show up in the story. And there's plenty of stories and verses in the Bible where Jesus isn't there. So what do we do when we come across weird verses like, and when he opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. Revelation 8, verse 1. Like, what do we do with that? What does that even mean? What do we do with crazy stories about people tying foxes together, setting them on fire, and talking donkeys and bushes that talk that are on fire, but they're not really on fire, but they are on fire? What do you do when you're reading commandments and some of them don't really make sense? Like, you shouldn't wear clothing that's made out of two different types of material. I'm good. The point is that sometimes there's just this disconnect. Like, we're supposed to be able to apply the Bible to our life. We're told that it's supposed to change our lives, but we read things like this and we're like, how in the world does this even apply to me? How does it apply to my situation that I'm going through? Am I missing part of the puzzle? Like, am I doing something wrong? Stop freaking out. There is a way forward and we're gonna figure that out together. But first, let's cover the basics. The Bible is a book, but it's not just one book. It's actually 66 books. They're not just all books either. Like, there's history books in here. There are songs in here. There's love letters in here. There's even a life hack book in here called Proverbs. And if you're looking at just the New Testament, like, most of that is just letters to an individual or to a church. And we've put all of these books and letters together to create one book that we call the Bible. And it's split up between Old Testament and New Testament. The Old Testament is everything before Jesus comes on the scene. The New Testament is when Jesus comes on the scene and what happens after that. And because of this, sometimes the Bible can feel a little confusing because it wasn't written all by one person all at one time. So when we read the Bible and we forget that it's actually a bunch of different documents put together, we're missing something huge. We're missing context. One thing that might be helpful when we're reading the Bible is to think about the context. So when we're reading something, to understand that, oh, this was written from a father to a son. Or this is a history book that's explaining everything in detail. Or, oh, this was written by people who were actually hanging out with Jesus. context changes the meaning of everything that we read. Take 2 Timothy, for example. 2 Timothy is called 2 Timothy because it's the second letter written to a person named Timothy. And we know by reading the beginning of this letter that this letter was written by Paul. So Paul is a missionary and Timothy is a pastor in Ephesus. And this is what Paul says to Timothy. Only Luke is with me. Bring Mark with you when you come, for he will be helpful to me in my ministry. I sent Tychicus to Ephesus. When you come, be sure to bring the coat I left with Carpus at Troas. Also bring my books and especially my papers. So what's that passage mean? So knowing the context of who wrote this letter and who it was written to, what does this letter tell us? It tells us that Paul wants his jacket back. Timothy, give it back, dude. And the second verse I want us to look at is probably a verse that you're familiar with. It's Philippians 4:13. For I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Now, with no context at all, we could read this and we could make the deduction that I can do anything I put my mind to because Christ is on my side. So if I want to do a slam dunk, no problem, Jesus got me. I don't have to study for my Spanish test, Jesus got me. I'm going to be the best volleyball player on the team this year without practicing because Jesus got me. With no context at all, this sounds like a formula to do anything you put your mind to. But is that really what it means? This letter found in Philippians is also written by Paul. And instead of writing it to one person, he's writing it to an entire church in Philippi. And what's interesting is that Paul is writing this from prison. And so the context of this verse is, Paul is saying, I've had a really bad time in my life. I've been in prison, I've been through this, I've been through that. But what I've learned is that no matter if I'm going through something horrible or if I'm going through something good, Jesus has taught me how to be content. This verse is really about contentment. He's saying, I can go through anything, I can endure anything because it's Christ who strengthens me. Paul was saying that he was totally dependent on Jesus. And it was his close relationship with Jesus that brought him strength and peace, even when things were tough. So this verse isn't about we're gonna win this game because God is on our side. It's more like we're gonna be okay if we win or lose. I'm gonna be okay if I have a little money or if I have a lot of money. I'm gonna be okay if my friends stay in town or if they move away. My contentment isn't in my situations, it's in Jesus. So as you can see, context changes everything. Imagine you're walking down the sidewalk and you see a folded up note and you walk up to it and you pick it up and you read it and it says, I can't believe what you did. You better watch your back. Would you automatically assume that that note is about you? Of course not, because we understand the context. It was a random note in the middle of the sidewalk. It has nothing to do with you. We know that there's more to the story. But the truth is that we do this with the Bible all the time. We go through the Bible and we pick different verses from here, from there, from there, from there, and we start applying it to our life. And we have no idea who that verse was written to. We have no idea what the context was. We just know that we like that verse. But the truth is, that verse may have nothing to do with us and does not apply to us. So if the point of the Bible is to know God better, it's too important to just guess what's going on. We need to understand context, because when we understand context, we understand the message that the Bible is trying to tell us, and therefore understanding God better. So how can we do this? I want to share 4 helpful practical tips that we can put in place while we're reading our Bible that I think will help us understand context just a little better. Number 1, ask yourself, who wrote this and who was it written to? Sometimes a passage doesn't make sense, but once we understand who the original audience was for, then we start understanding it a little bit better. Number 2, ask yourself, why was this written down? 2 Timothy was written to encourage a friend who was leading a church. Philippians was written down to remind a church that they were loved by God. When we understand the why, sometimes it helps us understand what we're reading. Number 3, what made people think that this information should be written down or saved? Like I said earlier, the Bible is made up of several documents that was written over a period of thousands of years. And at some point, people had to make a decision, like what was worth keeping, what wasn't worth keeping, what should be protected, what should be passed down to the next generation. And number 4, is this helpful to me or not? Don't get me wrong, the whole Bible is important, but not all parts of the Bible are as helpful as other parts of the Bible, depending on your situation. And that's fine. Sometimes what we have to do is read the Bible, and then when we come across something that feels very helpful, we should just stop and just think about it and let it sink in. The Bible has the ability to change our life, but sometimes to get to those helpful parts, we have to understand context. The truth is, the Bible doesn't always make sense immediately. It can be super confusing, but don't give up. Keep reading and focus on the verses that feel helpful and make sense to you. And whenever you come across something that's confusing and doesn't make sense, don't hesitate to ask for help. I'm always up for a random text about a Bible question. So as we start thinking about how we can start reading the Bible differently, I'd like to pray over all of us and ask God to help us get us there. God, thank you so much for your word and for what it means and for what it does in our lives. God, I pray that you would give us courage to read the Bible in a different way, in a way that is filled with curiosity. And God, help us not to give up and help us to ask questions when we come across something that's confusing and doesn't make sense. And God, we pray that you would just bless us as we go forward this week. In your son's name I pray, amen. Hey, thanks for watching this video, y'all. I hope it was a blessing and I hope it encouraged you to take that next step in your spiritual journey. I'll see y'all next time. Peace.